Look at your skin for a second. The color seems ordinary, almost permanent. Today, we obsess over it. We block the sun, we chase the sun, we warn people about burning, and we celebrate tanning. But that modern obsession hides an ancient question. Why did humans have dark skin in the first place? And why did some of us lose it? Human skin did not always look the way it does now. In fact, the story of how ancient humans lost their dark skin is one of the most surprising transformations in our species' history. The story most people know is simple. Early humans evolved dark skin in Africa to protect against brutal ultraviolet radiation. Then, when they moved north into cloudier, colder regions, their skins slowly turned lighter so they could make enough vitamin D. It sounds logical, clean, almost too clean. But what if that neat timeline is wrong? Our ancestors did not gradually turn pale just because they moved north. In fact, for tens of thousands of years, ancient Europeans stayed dark-skinned. How do we know? And why did they finally lose their dark skin? To understand why humans lost dark skin, we first need to know why we had it in the first place. Millions of years ago, early hominins like Homo erectus were persistent hunters. They chased large prey for hours until the animals literally collapsed from heat exhaustion. To run for that long under the blazing sun, our ancestors had to sweat. But thick fur traps heat. To survive, humans shed their fur. This brilliant survival strategy created a completely new problem. Bare skin was now fully exposed to damaging ultraviolet radiation. To protect our DNA from being shredded by the sun, our skin cranked up melanin production. Dark, melanin-rich skin became the universal default baseline for all modern humans. So, the textbook theory says that when humans reached the dim, high-latitude environments of Europe roughly 40,000 years ago, dark skin suddenly became a huge disadvantage. Melanin blocks up to 90% of UV rays. In Europe, that meant blocking the tiny amount of sunlight needed to synthesize vitamin D, which is critical for bone health. According to textbook logic, natural selection should have bleached their skin immediately just so they could survive. One major breakthrough came from Svante Pääbo's work, which opened the door to ancient DNA studies in the 1990s and 2000s. By 2010, researchers could begin reading genomes from people who lived thousands of years ago. That made it possible to track pigmentation genes through time instead of relying only on modern populations. Suddenly, we had the actual genetic blueprints of human history. That breakthrough meant we no longer had to imagine ancient skin color. We could test it. One of the most famous examples is Cheddar Man. In 1903, an ancient skeleton was discovered in a cave in Cheddar Gorge, England. Then, in 2018, researchers completely sequenced this 10,000-year-old genome. The results shocked the scientific world. Cheddar Man did not have pale skin. He had the genetic markers for vivid blue eyes, but his skin was dark brown to black. He wasn't just a strange anomaly. Geneticists like Dr. David Reich and colleagues, along with ancient DNA researchers working across Eurasia, mapped major pigmentation alleles across prehistoric populations. In 2015, genome-wide studies of ancient Eurasians showed that key light-skin variants were not yet fixed in many early Europeans. They looked especially at genes like SLC24A5 and SLC45A2, which are strongly linked to lighter skin in many modern populations. The data was undeniable. Mesolithic hunter-gatherers who had lived in the low-light environments of Europe for tens of thousands of years almost entirely lacked these light skin mutations. So how did they survive without their bones collapsing from vitamin D deficiency? The answer wasn't the sun. It was their dinner plate. European hunter-gatherers relied heavily on marine and river diets. They ate enormous amounts of fatty fish, animal liver, and eggs. These foods are rich in vitamin D. So even with dark skin and weaker northern sunlight, they could still get enough of this vital nutrient from food. Their diet provided a perfect evolutionary buffer. Because they ate their vitamin D, their bodies simply didn't care that the sun was weak. Then something happened that shattered that buffer almost overnight. Around 10,000 years ago, the agricultural revolution swept into Europe. Humans stopped hunting and gathering, settled down, and started farming. Early European farmers switched to a diet completely dominated by grain, like wheat and barley. Farming provided reliable calories, but grains contain absolutely zero vitamin D. Almost overnight, the dietary safety net vanished. Humans only have two ways to get this vital nutrient: eat it, or let the sun manufacture it inside their skin. Because they were no longer eating it, these early farmers had to rely 100% on the sun. This created a brutal biological crisis. The dark, melanin-rich skin of these early farmers acted like a heavy shield. It was perfectly designed to block UV rays. In the dim, cloudy environments of northern Europe, their dark skin blocked out the tiny amount of sunlight available. The sun's rays couldn't penetrate deep enough to trigger the chemical reaction that creates vitamin D. That created a silent biological crisis: weaker bones, poorer health, and lower survival. They were desperate for a solution. This is where population geneticists like Dr. Mark Thomas and Dr. Joachim Berger come in. Their work, along with broader ancient DNA studies, helped track how a copying error in SLC24A5 changed history. The earliest known sample of the derived SLC24A5 allele has been reported from a 13,000-year-old individual, and by the Neolithic it was spreading widely across parts of Anatolia and Europe. That mutation lowered melanin production. It thinned the shield. Suddenly, weak northern sunlight could get through more easily and trigger vitamin D synthesis. The early farmers who carried this light skin allele synthesized enough vitamin D to survive the crisis. Those who didn't perish. Within just a few thousand years, this mutation swept through the farming populations of Europe at astonishing speed. But the story gets even more surprising once we leave Europe. East Asians also lived in high latitudes and faced low sunlight. Genetic data reveal they developed lighter skin through completely different mutations, like variants in the OCA2 gene, which are absent in Europeans. Biologists call this convergent evolution. It is the exact same process that gave both sharks and dolphins streamlined bodies. The environment asked the same harsh question, but the genetics of Europe and East Asia came up with two entirely different biological answers. Skin lightening wasn't a single, uniform event. It was a chaotic, staggered series of independent inventions. Today, this ancient history still matters. We live indoors. We travel across the world in hours. We spend less time under the sun than our ancestors did. That is why skin issues and vitamin D deficiency remain major health issues. Our bodies were shaped for one world, but we live in another. That mismatch is part of the reason skin is still such a sensitive health issue today. Human skin color is not a simple ladder from dark to light. It is a messy mosaic. It was shaped by the loss of body fur on the African savanna, protected by the diets of ancient foragers, disrupted by farming, and reinvented independently across different continents. Your skin is much more than just a physical trait to manage. It is a living, breathing historical record. It is a biological map of everywhere your ancestors migrated, everything they ate, and every evolutionary crisis they ever survived.